Hi again, everybody. I just uploaded part 2 of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, so I'm also going to read part 2 of Lamb. I hope you're enjoying it. If you're not, just let me know and I'll switch to another book. I hope everybody's day has been calm and uneventful. Mine was a little bananas, which is why I am wearing my sloth onesie, because sometimes you just have to stop being an adult and wear a sloth onesie. But without further ado, I will go ahead and get started here. So we're on chapter 2. The angel wants me to convey more of Joshua's grace. Grace? I'm trying to write about a 6-year-old, for Christ's sake. How much grace could he have? It's not like Joshua walked around professing that he was the son of God every day of the week. He was a pretty normal kid, for the most part. There was the trick he did with the lizards, and once we found a dead meadowlark and he brought it back to life, and there was a time when we were 8 when he healed his brother Judah's fractured skull after a game of Stone the Adulteress got out of hand. Judah could never get the knack of being an adulteress. He'd stand there stiff as Lot's wife. You can't do that. An adulteress has to be wily and nimble-footed. The miracles Joshua performed were small and quiet, as miracles tend to be once you get used to them. But trouble came from the miracles that happened around him, without his volition, as it were. Bread and serpents come to mind. It was a few days before the Passover feast, and many of the families of Nazareth were not making the pilgrimage to Jerusalem that year. There had been little rain through our winter season, so it was going to be a hard year. Many farmers could not afford the time away from their fields to travel to and from the holy city. My father and Joshua's were both working in Sepphoris, and the Romans wouldn't give them time off work beyond the actual feast days. My mother had been making the unleavened bread, and when I came in from playing in the square. She held a dozen sheets of flatbread before her, and she looked as if she was going to dash it to the floor any second. Biff, where is your friend Joshua? My little brothers grinned at me from behind her skirts. At home, I suppose. I just left him. What have your boys been doing? Nothing. I tried to remember if I had done anything that should make her this angry, but nothing came to mind. It was a rare day when I'd made no trouble. Both my little brothers were unscathed as far as I knew. What have you done to cause this? She held out a seed of the flatbread, and there, in crispy brown relief on the golden crust, was the image of my friend Joshua's face. She snatched up another sheet of bread, and there again was my friend Josh. Graven images. Big sin. Josh was smiling. Mother frowned on smiling. Well, do I need to go to Joshua's house and ask his poor, insane mother? I did this. I put Joshua's face on the bread. I just hoped that she didn't ask me how I had done it. Your father will punish you when he comes home this evening. Now go, get out of here. I could hear my little brothers giggling as I slunk out the door, but once outside, things worsened. Women were coming away from their baking stones, and each held a sheet of unleavened bread, and each was muttering some variation of, hey, there's a kid on my bread. I ran to Joshua's house and stormed in without knocking. Joshua and his brothers were at the table eating. Mary was nursing Joshua's newest little sister, Miriam. You are in big trouble, I whispered in Josh's ear with enough force to blow out an eardrum. Josh held up the flatbread he was eating and grinned, just like the face on his bread. It's a miracle. Tastes good, too, said James, crunching a corner off of his brother's head. It's all over town, Joshua, not just your house. Everybody's bread has your face on it. He is truly the Son of God, Mary said with a beatific smile. Oh, geez, Mother, James said. Yeah, geez, Mom, said Judah. His mug is all over the Passover feast. We have to do something. They didn't seem to get the gravity of the situation. I was already in trouble, and my mother didn't even suspect anything supernatural. We have to cut your hair. What? We cannot cut his hair, Mary said. She had always let Joshua wear his hair long, like an Essenes, saying that he was a Nazarite like Samson. It was just another reason why many of the townspeople thought her mad. The rest of us wore our hair cut short, like the Greeks, who had ruled our country since the times of Alexander, and the Romans after them. If we cut his hair, he looks like the rest of us. We can say it's someone else on the bread. Moses, Mary said. Young Moses. Yes. I'll get a knife. James, Judah, come with me, I said. We have to tell the town that the face of Moses has come to visit us for the Passover feast. Mary pulled Miriam from her breast, bent and kissed me on the forehead. You are a good friend, Biff. I almost melted in my sandals, but I caught Joshua frowning at me. It's not the truth, he said. It will keep the Pharisees from judging you. I'm not afraid of them, said the 9-year-old. I didn't do this to the bread. Then why take the blame and punishment for it? I don't know. Seems like I should, doesn't it? Sit still so your mother can cut your hair. I dashed out the door, Judah and James on my heels, the 3 of us bleating like spring lambs. Behold, Moses has put his face on the bread for Passover. Behold! Miracles. She kissed me. Holy Moses on a matzah. She kissed me. The miracle of the serpent? It was an omen in a way, although I can only say that because of what happened between Joshua and the Pharisees later on. At the time, Joshua thought it was the fulfillment of a prophecy, or that's how he tried to sell it to his mother and father. It was late summer and we were playing in a wheat field outside of town when Joshua found the nest of vipers. "A nest of vipers!" Joshua shouted. The wheat was so tall I couldn't see where he was calling from. "A pox on your family," I replied. "No, there's a nest of vipers over here, really." "Oh, I thought you were taunting me. Sorry, a pox off your family." "Come see." I crashed through the wheat to find Joshua standing by a pile of stones the farmer had used to mark the boundary of his field. I screamed and backpedaled so quickly that I lost my balance and fell. A knot of snakes writhed at Joshua's feet, skating over his sandals and wrapping themselves around his ankles. "Joshua, get away from there." "They won't hurt me. It says so in Isaiah." "Just in case they haven't read the prophets." Joshua stepped aside, sending the snakes scattering, and there behind him was the biggest cobra I had ever seen. It reared up until it was taller than my friend, spreading a hood like a cloak. "Run, Joshua." He smiled. "I'm going to call her Sarah, after Abraham's wife. These are her children." "No kidding. Say goodbye now, Josh." "I want to show Mother. She loves prophecy." With that, he was off toward the village, the giant serpent following him like a shadow. The baby snakes stayed in the nest, and I backed slowly away before running after my friend. I once brought a frog home, hoping to keep him as a pet. Not a large frog, a one-handed frog, quiet and well-mannered. My mother made me release him, then cleanse myself in the immersion pool, the mikveh, at the synagogue. Still, she wouldn't let me in the house until after sunset because I was unclean. Joshua led a 14-foot-long cobra into his house, and his mother squealed with joy. My mother never squealed. Mary slung the baby to her hip, kneeled in front of her son, and quoted Isaiah. "The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. And the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice's den." James, Judah, and Elizabeth cowered in the corner, too frightened to cry. I stood outside the doorway watching. The snake swayed behind Joshua as if preparing to strike. "Her name is Sarah." "They were cobras, not asps," I said. "A whole pile of cobras." "Can we keep her?" Joshua asked. "I'll catch rats for her and make a bed for her next to Elizabeth's." "Definitely not asps. I'd know an asp if I saw one. Probably not a cockatrice either. I'd say a cobra." Actually, I didn't know an asp from a hole in the ground. "Shush, Biff," Mary said. My heart broke with the harshness in my love's voice. Just then, Joseph rounded the corner and went through the door before I could catch him. "No worry," he was back outside in an instant. "Jumpin' Jehoshaphat!" I checked to see if Joseph's heart had failed, having quickly decided that once Mary and I were married, the snake would have to go, or at least sleep outside. But the burly carpenter seemed only shaken, and a little dusty from his backward dive through the door. "Not an asp, right?" I asked. "Asps are made small to fit the breasts of Egyptian queens, right?" Joseph ignored me. "Back away slowly, son. I'll get a knife from my workshop." "She won't hurt us," Joshua said. "Her name is Sarah. She's from Isaiah." "It is the prophecy, Joseph," Mary said. I could see Joseph searching his memory for the passage, although only a layman who knew the scripture as well as anyone. "I don't remember the part about Sarah." "I don't think it's prophecy," I offered. "It says asps, and that's definitely not an asp. I say she's going to bite Joshua's ass off if you don't grab her, Joseph." The guy had to try. "Can I keep her?" Joshua asked. Joseph had regained his composure by now. Evidently, once you accept that your wife slept with God, extraordinary events seem sort of commonplace. "Take her back where you found her, Joshua. The prophecy has been fulfilled now." "But I want to keep her." "No, Joshua. You're not the boss of me." I suspected that Joseph had heard that before. "Just so," he said. "Please take Sarah back where you found her." Joshua stormed out of the house, his snake following close behind. Joseph and I gave them a wide berth. "Try not to let anyone see you," Joseph said. "They won't understand." He was right, of course. On our way out of the village, we ran into a gang of older boys, led by Jachin, the son of Eben the Pharisee. They did not understand. There were perhaps a dozen Pharisees in Nazareth, learned men, working-class teachers who spent most of their time at the synagogue debating the law. They were often hired as judges and scribes, and this gave them great influence over the people of the village. So much influence, in fact, that the Romans often used them as mouthpieces to our people. With influence comes power, with power abuse. Jachin was the only son of a Pharisee. He was only 2 years older than Joshua and me, but he was well on his way to mastering cruelty. If there is a single joy in having everyone you have ever known 2,000 years dead, it is that Jachin is one of them. May his fat crackle in the fires of hell for eternity. Joshua taught us that we should not hate, a lesson I was never able to master, along with geometry. Blame Jacob for the former, Euclid for the latter. Joshua ran behind the houses and shops of the village, the snake behind him 10 steps, and me behind her 10 steps more. As he rounded the corner by the smith's shop, Joshua ran into Jacob, knocking him to the ground. "You idiot!" Jacob shouted, rising and dusting himself off. His 3 friends laughed, and he spun on them like an angry tiger. "This one needs to have his face washed in dung. Hold him!" The boys turned the focus on Joshua, grabbing his arms while the third punched him in the stomach. Jacob turned to look for a pile to rub Joshua's face in. Sarah slithered around the corner and reared up behind Joshua, spreading her glorious hood wide above her head. "Hey!" I called as I rounded the corner. "You guys think this is an asp?" My fear of the snake had changed into a sort of wary affection. She seemed to be smiling. I know I was. Sarah swayed from side to side like a wheat stalk in the wind. The boys dropped Joshua's arms and ran to Jacob, who had turned and slowly backed away. "Joshua was talking about asps," I continued, "but I'd have to say that this here is a cobra." Joshua was bent over, still trying to catch his breath, but he looked back at me and grinned. "Of course, I'm not the son of a Pharisee, but he's in league with the serpent!" Jacob screamed. "He consorts with demons!" "Demons!" the other boys shouted, trying to crowd behind their fat friend. "I will tell my father of this, and you'll be stoned." A voice from behind Jacob said, "What is all this shouting?" And a sweet voice it was. She came out of the house by the smith's shop. Her skin shone like copper, and she had the light blue eyes of the northern desert people. Wisps of reddish-brown hair showed at the edge of her purple shawl. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, but there was something very old in her eyes. I stopped breathing when I saw her. Jacob puffed up like a toad. "Stay back. These 2 are consorting with a demon. I will tell the elders, and they will be judged." She spit at his feet. I'd never seen a girl spit before. It was charming. "It looks like a cobra to me." "See there! I told you." She walked up to Sarah as if she were approaching a fig tree looking for fruit, not a hint of fear, only interest. "You think this is a demon?" she said without looking back at Jacob. "Wouldn't you be embarrassed when the elders find that you mistook a common snake of the field for a demon?" "It is a demon." The girl reached her hand up, and the snake made as if to strike, then lowered its head until its forked tongue was brushing the girl's fingers. "This is definitely a cobra, little boy. And these 2 were probably leading it back to the fields where it would help the farms by eating rats." "Yep, that's what we were doing," I said. "Absolutely," Joshua said. The girl turned to Jacob and his friends. "A demon?" Jacob stomped like an angry donkey. "You are in league with them." "Don't be silly. My family has only just arrived from Magdala. I've never seen these 2 before, but it's obvious what they were doing. We do it all the time in Magdala, but then, this is a backwater village." "We do it here too," Jacob said. These 2 make trouble." "Trouble," his friend said. "Why don't we let them get on with what they were doing?" Jacob, his eyes bouncing from the girl to the snake to the girl again, began to lead his friends away. "I will deal with you 2 another time." As soon as they were around the corner, the girl jumped back from the snake and ran towards the door of her house. "Wait," Joshua called. "I have to go." "What is your name?" "I'm Mary of Magdala, daughter of Isaac," she said. "Call me Maggie." "Come with us, Maggie." "I can't. I have to go." "Why?" "Because I've peed myself." She disappeared through the door. Miracles. Once we were back into the wheat field, Sarah headed for her den. We watched from a distance as she slid down the hole. "Josh, how did you do that?" "I have no idea." "Is it this kind of thing going to keep happening?" "Probably." "We are going to get in a lot of trouble, aren't we?" "What am I, a prophet?" "I asked you first." Joshua stared into the sky like a man in a trance. "Did you see her? She's afraid of nothing." "She's a giant snake. What's to be afraid of?" Joshua frowned. "Don't pretend to be simple, Biff. We were saved by a serpent and a girl. I don't know what to think about that." "Why think about it at all? It just happened." "Nothing happens but by God's will," Joshua said. "It doesn't fit with the testament of Moses." "Maybe it's a New Testament," I said. "You aren't pretending, are you?" Joshua said. "You really are simple." "I think she likes you better than she likes me," I said. "The snake?" "Right. I'm the simple one." I don't know if now, having lived and died the life of a man, I can write about little boy love. But remembering it now, it seems the cleanest pain I've known. Love without desire or conditions or limits. A pure and radiant glow in the heart that can make me giddy and sad and glorious all at once. Where does it go? Why in all their experiments did the Magi never try to capture that purity in a bottle? Perhaps they couldn't. Perhaps it is lost to us when we become sexual creatures and no magic can bring it back. Perhaps I only remember it because I spent so long trying to understand the love that Joshua felt for everyone. In the East, they taught us that all suffering comes from desire, and that rough beasts would stalk me through my life. But on that afternoon, and for a time after, I touched grace. At night I would lie awake, listening to my brother's breathing against the silence of the house. and in my mind's eye I could see her eyes like blue fire in the dark. Exquisite torture. I wonder now if Joshua didn't make her whole life like that. Maggie. She was the strongest of us all. After the miracle of the serpent, Joshua and I made up excuses to pass by the smith shop where we might run into Maggie. Every morning we would rise early and go to Joseph, volunteering to run the smith for some nails or a repair of a tool. Poor Joseph took this as an enthusiasm for carpentry. Would you boys like to come to Sephora's with me tomorrow? Joseph asked us one day when we were badgering him about fetching nails. Biff, would your father let you start learning the work of a carpenter? I was mortified. At 10, a boy was expected to start learning his father's trade, but that was a year away. Forever when you're 9. I am still thinking about what I will do when I grow up, I said. My own father had made a similar offer to Joshua the day before. So you won't become a stone cutter? I was thinking about becoming the village idiot if my father will allow it. He has a God-given talent, Joshua said. I've been talking to Bartholomew the idiot, I said. He's going to teach me how to fling my own dung and run headlong into walls. Joseph scowled at me. Perhaps you two are yet too young. Next year. Yes, Joshua said, next year. May we go now, Joseph? Biff is meeting Bartholomew for his lesson. Joseph nodded and we were off before he inflicted more kindness upon us. We actually had befriended Bartholomew the village idiot. He was foul and drooled a lot, but he was large and offered some protection against Jakin and his bullies. Bart also spent most of his time begging near the town square where the women came to fetch water from the well. From time to time we caught a glimpse of Maggie as she passed, a water jar balanced on her head. You know, we are going to have to start working soon, Joshua said. I won't see you once I'm working with my father. Joshua, look around you. Do you see any trees? No. And the trees we do have, olive trees. Twisted, gnarly, naughty things, right? Right. But you're going to be a carpenter like your father? There's a chance of it. One word, Josh. Rocks. Rocks? Look around. Rocks as far as the eye can see. Galilee is nothing but rocks, dirt, and more rocks. Be a stonemason like me and my father. We can build cities for the Romans. Actually, I was thinking about saving mankind. Forget that nonsense, Josh. Rocks. I tell ya. Chapter 3. The angel will tell me nothing of what happened to my friends of the 12 of Maggie. All he'll say is that they are dead and that I have to write my own version of the story. Oh, he'll tell me useless angel stories of how Gabriel disappeared once for 60 years and they found him on earth hiding in the body of a man named Miles Davis, or how Raphael snuck out of heaven to visit Satan and returned with something called a cell phone. Evidently, everyone has them in hell now. He watched the television, and when they show an earthquake or a tornado, he'll say, I destroyed a city with one of those once. Mine was better. I'm a watching useless angel prattle, but about my own time I know nothing but what I saw. And when the television makes mention of Joshua, calling him by his Greek name, Raziel changed the channel before I can learn anything. He never sleeps. He just watches me, watches the television, and eats. He never leaves the room. Today, while searching for extra towels, I opened one of the drawers, and there, beneath a plastic bag meant for laundry, I found a book. Holy Bible, it said on the cover. Thank the Lord I did not take the book from the drawer, but opened it with my back to the angel. There are chapters there that were in no Bible I knew. I saw the names of Matthew and John. I saw Romans and Galatians. This is a book of my time. What are you doing? The angel asked. I covered the Bible and closed the drawer. Looking for towels. I need to bathe. You bathed yesterday. Cleanliness is important to my people. I know that. What, you think I don't know that? You're not exactly the brightest halo in the bunch. Then bathe and stay away from the television. Why don't you go get me some towels? I'll call down to the desk. And he did. If I'm going to get a look at that book, I must get the angel to leave the room. It came to pass that in the village of Japhiah, I don't know how to pronounce that word, the sister village of Nazareth, that Esther, the mother of one of the priests of the temple, died of bad air. The Levite priests, or Sadducees, were rich from the tributes we paid to the temple, and mourners were hired from all the surrounding villages. The families of Nazareth made the journey to the next hill for the funeral, and for the first time, Joshua and I were able to spend time with Maggie as we walked along the road. So, she said without looking at us, have you two been playing with any snakes lately? We've been waiting for the lion to lay down with the lamb, Joshua said. That's the next part of the prophecy. What prophecy? Never mind, I said. Snakes are for boys. We're almost men. We will begin working after the Feast of Tabernacles in Sephora's. I was trying to sound worldly. Maggie seemed unimpressed. And you will learn to be a carpenter? She asked Joshua. I will do the work of my father eventually, yes. And you? She asked. I'm thinking of being a professional mourner. How hard can it be? Tear out your hair, sing a dirge or two, take the rest of the week off. His father is a stonemason, Joshua said. We may both learn that skill. At my urging, my father had offered to take Joshua on as an apprentice if Joseph approved. Or a shepherd, I added quickly. Being a shepherd seems easy. I went with Khalil last week to tend his flock. The law says that two must go with the flock to keep an abomination from happening. I can spot an abomination from 50 paces. Maggie smiled. And did you prevent any abominations? Oh, yes. I kept all of the abominations at bay while Khalil played with his favorite sheep behind the bushes. Biff, Joshua said gravely. That was the abomination you were supposed to prevent. It was? Yes. Whoops. Oh well, I think I would make an excellent mourner. Do you know the words to any dirges, Maggie? I'm going to need to learn some dirges. I think that when I grow up, Maggie announced, I shall go back to Magdalene and become a fisherman on the Sea of Galilee. I laughed. Don't be silly. You're a girl. You can't be a fisherman. Yes, I can. No, you can't. You have to marry and have sons. Are you betrothed, by the way? Joshua said, Come with me, Maggie, and I will make you a fisher of men. What the hell does that mean? Maggie asked. I grabbed Joshua by the back of his robe and began to drag him away. Don't pay any attention to him. He's mad. He gets it from his mother. Lovely woman, but a loony. Come now, Josh, let's sing a dirge. I began improvising what I thought was a good funeral song. La la la, oh, we are really, really sad that your mom is dead. Too bad you're a sadducee and don't believe in an afterlife and your mom is just going to be worm food. La la, makes you think you might want to reconsider, huh? La 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 waka waka. It sounded great in Aramaic, really. You two are silly. Gotta go, morning to you, see you. A fisher of women, Josh said. Fa la la, don't feel bad, she was old and had no teeth left. La la la. Come on, people, you know the words. Later, I said to Josh, you can't keep saying creepy things like that. Fisher of men? You want the Pharisees to stone you? Is that what you want? I'm only doing my father's work. Besides, Maggie is our friend. She wouldn't say anything. You're gonna scare her away. No, I won't. She's going to be with us, Biff. Are you gonna marry her? I don't even know if I'm allowed to marry at all, Biff. Look. We were topping the hill into Jaffia, and we could see the crowds of mourners gathering around the village. Joshua was pointing to a red crest that stood out above the crowd, the helmet crest of a Roman centurion. The centurion was talking to the Levite priest, who was arrayed in white and gold, his white beard reaching past his belt. As we moved into the village, we could see 20 or 30 other soldiers watching the crowd. Why are they here? They don't like it when we gather, Joshua said, pausing to study the centurion commander. They are here to see that we don't revolt. Why is the priest talking to him? The Sadducee wants to assure the Romans of his influence over us. It wouldn't do to have a massacre on the day of his mother's funeral. So he's watching out for us. He's watching out for himself. Only for himself. You shouldn't say that about a priest of the temple, Joshua. It was the first time I ever heard Joshua speak against the Sadducees, and it frightened me. Today I think this priest will learn who the temple belongs to. I hate it when you talk like that, Josh. Maybe we should go home. Do you remember the dead meadowlark we found? I have a really bad feeling about this. Joshua grinned at me. I could see gold flecks shining in his eyes. Sing your dirge, Biff. I think Maggie was impressed by your singing. Really? You think so? Nope. There was a crowd of 500 outside the tomb. In the front, the men had draped striped shawls over their heads and rocked as they prayed. The women were separated to the back, and except for the wailing of the hired mourners, it was as if they didn't exist. I tried to catch a glimpse of Maggie, but couldn't see her through the crowd. When I turned again, Joshua had wormed his way to the front of the men, where the priest stood beside the corpse of his dead mother, reading from a scroll of the Torah. The woman had wrapped the corpse in linen and anointed it with fragrant oils. I could smell sandalwood and jasmine among the acrid sweat of the mourners as I made my way to the front and stood beside Joshua. He looked past the priest and was staring at the corpse, his eyes narrowed in concentration. He was trembling as if taken by a chill wind. The priest finished his reading and began to sing, joined by the voices of hired singers who had made the journey all the way from the temple in Jerusalem. It's good to be rich, huh? I whispered to Joshua, elbowing him in the ribs. He ignored me and balled up his fists at his side. A vein stood out on his forehead, and he burned his gaze into the corpse. And she moved. Just a twitch at first, the jerk of her hand under the linen shroud. I think I was the only one who noticed. No, Joshua, don't, I said. I looked for the Romans, who were gathered in groups of 5 at different points around the perimeter of the crowd looking bored, their hands resting on the hafts of their short swords. The corpse twitched again and raised her arm. There was a gasp in the crowd and a boy screamed. The men started backing away, and the women pushed forward to see what was happening. Joshua fell to his knees and pressed his fists to his temples. The priest sang on. The corpse sat up. The singer stopped, and finally the priest turned to look behind him at his dead mother, who had swung her legs off of the slab and looked as if she was trying to stand. The priest stumbled back into the crowd, clawing at the air before his eyes as if some vapor was causing this horrible vision. Joshua was rocking on his knees, tears streaming down his cheeks. The corpse stood, and still covered by the shroud, turned as if she was looking around. I could see that several of the Romans had drawn their swords. I looked around and found the commanding centurion standing on the back of a wagon, giving signals to his men to stay calm. When I looked back, I realized that Joshua and I had been deserted by the mourners, and we stood out in the empty space. "Stop it now, Josh," I whispered in his ear, but he continued to rock and concentrate on the corpse, who took her first step. The crowd seemed to be transfixed by the walking corpse, but we were too isolated, too alone now with the dead, and I knew it would only be seconds before they noticed Joshua rocking in the dirt. I threw my arm around his throat and dragged him back away from the corpse and into a group of men who were wailing as they backed away. "Is he all right?" I heard at my ear and turned to see Maggie standing beside me. "Help me get him away." Maggie took one of Josh's arms, and I took the other as we dragged him away. His body was as stiff as a walking staff, and he kept his gaze trained on the corpse. The dead woman was walking towards her son, the priest, who was backing away, brandishing the scroll like a sword, his eyes as big as saucers. Finally, the woman fell in the dirt, twitched, then lay still. Joshua went limp in our arms. "Let's get him out of here," I said to Maggie. She nodded and helped me drag him behind the wagon where the centurion was directing his troops. "Is he dead?" the centurion asked. Joshua was blinking as if he'd just been awakened from a deep sleep. "We're never sure, sir," I said. The centurion threw his head back and laughed. His scale armor rattled with the toss of his shoulders. He was older than the other soldiers, gray-haired, but obviously lean and strong and totally unconcerned with the histrionics of the crowd. "Good answer, boy. What is your name?" "Biff, sir. Levi Bar Alphaeus, who is called Biff, sir, of Nazareth." "Well, Biff, I am Gaius Justus Gallicus, under commander of Sepphoris, and I think that you Jews should make sure your dead are dead before you bury them." "Yes, sir," I said. "You, girl, you are a pretty little thing. What is your name?" I could see that Maggie was shaken by the attention of the Roman. "I am Mary of Magdala, sir." She wiped at Joshua's brow with the edge of her shawl as she spoke. "You will break someone's heart someday, eh, little one?" Maggie didn't answer, but I must have shown some reaction to the question because Hustus laughed again. "Or maybe she already has, eh, Biff?" "It is our way, sir. That's why we Jews bury our women when they are still alive. It cuts down on the heartbreak." The Roman took off his helmet, ran his hand over his short hair, and flung Suede at me. "Go on, you two. Get your friend into the shade. It's too hot out here for a sick boy. Go on." Maggie and I helped Joshua to his feet and began to lead him away. But when we had gone only a few steps, Joshua stopped and looked back over his shoulder at the Roman. "Will you slay my people if we follow our God?" he shouted. I cuffed him on the back of the head. "Joshua, are you insane?" Justice narrowed his gaze at Joshua, and the smile went out of his eyes. "Whatever they tell you, boy, Rome has only 2 rules. Pay your taxes and don't rebel. Follow those and you'll stay alive." Maggie yanked Joshua around and smiled back at the Roman. "Thank you, sir. We'll get him out of the sun." Then she turned back to Joshua. "Is there something you two would like to tell me?" "It's not me," I said. "It's him." The next day we met the angel for the first time. Mary and Joseph said that Joshua had left the house at dawn and they hadn't seen him since. I wandered around the village most of the morning, looking for Joshua and hoping to run into Maggie. The square was alive with talk of the walking dead woman, but neither of my friends were to be found. At noon my mother recruited me to watch my little brother while she went to work with the other women in the vineyard. She returned at dusk, smelling of sweat and sweet wine, her feet purple from walking in the wine-press. Cut loose, I ran all over the hilltop, checking in our favorite places to play, and finally found Joshua on his knees in an olive grove, rocking back and forth as he prayed. He was soaking in sweat, and I was afraid he might have a fever. Strange. I never felt that sort of concern for my own brothers, but from the beginning, Joshua filled me with a divinely inspired worry. I watched and waited, and when he had stopped rocking and sat back to rest, I faked a cough to let him know I was coming. "Maybe you should stick with lizards for a while longer." I failed. I've disappointed my father. "Did he tell you that, or do you just know it?" He thought for a moment, made as if to brush his hair away from his face, then remembered he no longer wore his hair long and dropped his hands into his lap. I asked for guidance, but I got no answer. I feel as if I'm supposed to do things, but I don't know what, and I don't know how. I don't know. I think the priest was surprised. I certainly was. Maggie was. People will be talking about it for months. But I wanted the woman to live again, to walk among us, to tell of the miracle. Well, it is written 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Where's that written? Dalmatians 9:7, I think. Doesn't matter. No one else could have done what you did. Joshua nodded. What are people saying? They think that it was something the woman used to prepare the corpse. They are still going through purification for 2 more days, so no one can ask them. So they don't know it was me? I hope not. Joshua, don't you understand that you can't do that sort of thing in front of people? They aren't ready for it. But most of them want it. They talk about the Messiah coming to deliver us all the time. Don't I have to show them that he has come? What do you say to that? He was right. Since I could remember, there was always talk of the coming of the Messiah, of the coming of the kingdom of heaven, of the liberation of our people from the Romans. The hills were full of different factions of zealots who skirmished with the Romans in hope that they could bring about the change. We were chosen of God, blessed and punished like none other on earth. When the Jews spoke, God listened. Now it was God's turn to speak. Evidently, my best friend was supposed to be the mouthpiece, but at the moment I just didn't believe it. Despite what I had seen, Joshua was my pal, not the Messiah. I said, I'm pretty sure the Messiah is supposed to have a beard. So it's not time yet. Is that what you're saying? Right, Josh. I'm going to know when you don't. God sent a messenger to me and he said, by the way, tell Joshua to wait until he can shave before he leads my people out of bondage. It could happen. Don't ask me. Ask God. That's what I've been doing. He's not answering. It had been getting darker by the minute in the olive grove, and I could barely see the shine in Josh's eyes. But suddenly the area around us was lit up like daylight. We looked up to see the dreaded Raziel descending on us from above the treetops. Of course, I didn't know he was the dreaded Raziel at the time. I was just terrified. The angel shone like a star above us, his features so perfect that even my beloved Maggie's beauty paled by comparison. Joshua hid his face and huddled against the trunk of an olive tree. I guess he was more easily surprised by the supernatural than I was. I just stood there staring with my mouth open, drooling like the village idiot. Fear not, for behold, I bring you tidings of great joy, which shall be to all men. For on this day in the city of David is born a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. Then he hovered for a second, waiting for his message to sink in. Joshua uncovered his face and risked a glance at the angel. Well, the angel said. It took me a second to digest the meaning of the words, and I waited for Joshua to say something. But he had turned his face skyward and seemed to be basking in the light, a silly smile locked on his face. Finally, I pointed a thumb at Josh and said, he was born in the city of David. Really? Said the angel. Yep. His mother's name is Mary? Yep. She a virgin? He has 4 brothers and sisters now, but at the time, yes. The angel looked around nervously as if he might expect a multitude of the heavenly host to show up at some point. How old are you, kid? Joshua just stared, smiling. He's 10. The angel cleared his throat and fidgeted a bit, dropping a few feet toward the ground as he did so. I'm in a lot of trouble. I stopped to chat with Michael on the way here. He had a deck of cards. I knew some time had passed, but... To Joshua, he said, Kid, were you born in a stable, wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger? Joshua said nothing. That's the way his mom tells it, I said. Is he retarded? I think you're his first angel. He's just impressed, I think. What about you? I'm in trouble because I'm going to be an hour late for dinner. I see what you mean. I better get back and check on this. If you see some shepherds watching over their flocks by night, would you tell them that at some point, probably, 10 years or so ago, that a Savior was born? Could you do that? Sure. Okie dokie. Glory to God in the highest. Peace on earth, goodwill towards men. Right back at you. Thanks. Bye. And as quickly as he had come, the angel was gone, shooting in a shooting star, and the olive grove went dark again. I could just make out Joshua's face as he turned to look at me. There you go, I said. Next question. All right, everybody. I will be back tomorrow with the next parts of both stories. Since I am furloughed, if anybody wants me to read them live or read something else live, I'd be happy to do that too. So just let me know. Otherwise, have a wonderful night. Bye, everybody.